Hey there! Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.
For our other half of our Stearns and Luigi Mangione breakdown of our charges and the new motion that was recently filed, Luigi Mangione, we're going to break down each individual charge. I know that a lot of you guys have asked me questions about the individual charges, and so we're going to go through those. So the first one that we have is he got first degree murder, intentional murder in furtherance of act of terrorism. Okay, so a lot of you guys asked me, so where did they get that charge? That charge, not that I agree with it at all, because most of it's not relevant, but the act of terrorism, under our law, it states under Penal Code 12527, and it's specifically only for first degree intentional murder in furtherance of act of terrorism. Under our law, a defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree when and with intent to cause the death of another person. He or she causes the death of such person or of a third person, and the victim was killed in furtherance of an act of terrorism, and the defendant was more than 18 years of age. Now, for those of you who are my typical followers, you understand that we break down the elements on statutes. So the first element with intentional murder and furtherance act of terrorism is intent, which means you have to have a conscious, objective, or purpose. Thus, a person acts with intent to cause the death of another person. So intent has to be your first element that you have to meet before you can be charged with it. So here's the second one. The second element is an act of terrorism, which means activities that involve a violent act or acts dangerous to human life that are in violation of the criminal laws of this state. And they're intended to, number one, intimidate or coerce a civilian population. That is one thing that they stated was a contributing factor to them charging Mangione with first degree intentional murder in furtherance of act of terrorism. The second is influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, or affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder. So for those of you who were emailing me and asking me where they got the first degree intentional murder act of terrorism charge, that is where they have accumulated that charge. Again, this is state charges. This is not his federal charges. So his federal charges are separate. But this is just the state charges. Okay. And the part 3 of the element, which is the act of terrorism, one of the elements is affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder. Now, this is an assassination or a kidnapping. And if you quite remember, whenever they stated they went over his case and some of the aspects of it, they charged him, the state has charged him with assassination more or less because it was more or less a prominent individual, so to speak, which I would not consider that. The people contend that criminal laws of this state that were violated is and are. In order for you to find that the defendant guilty of this crime, the people are required to prove. Now, this is only convicting. This is only if you were convicting someone. This is for the first degree terrorism, act of furtherance of terrorism. So once he goes to trial, this will be some of the qualifications they would have to meet before they can actually convict him on this specific charge. So in order for them to find the defendant guilty of this crime, that on or about did so with intent to cause the death of that person or a third person. So they're going to have to show that he intentionally meant to kill him. There was a purpose behind it. There was intent. That the defendant did so with the intent to cause the death, and that the victim was killed in the furtherance of an act of terrorism. That the defendant was more than 18 years of age, which clearly he was. They have to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. Each of these elements, you must find the defendant in order for them to be guilty. Now, if they find that they have not proven beyond a reasonable doubt, if there's any of those elements that are not met, for example, they not prove their case with intent or furtherance an act of terrorism. Now, remember the three principles of the victim furtherance of an act of terrorism. So that broke down. Okay, so those are the elements of the crime. Okay, so that he's charged with the furtherance an act of terrorism. So they have to meet those elements in order to actually convict him. But that is what he's being charged with. So for those who said, what is furtherance of active terrorism? That is the individual elements that I read off a second ago, which is intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a unit or government by intimidation or coercion, and affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder. So they're considering him, even though he is a CEO of a healthcare, they're considering him a prominent individual. So therefore, categorizing him as if it were like the president or someone in that category. So that's where he got first degree, because if you remember, in the state of New York, you cannot get first degree murder unless it is an individual such as an individual who is a very prominent, active, like the president, governor, someone that specifically has a large prominence, I guess you could say, in position. So they questioned whether or not they would be able to charge him with the first degree because of this reason, the fact that he technically wasn't a prominent individual, but like we stated before, they are looking to get him on whatever they possibly can. So they managed a way to get that in there somehow. So, and again, the jury might, just because they charge you with something like that doesn't mean that the jury is going to consider that guilty. He may go on to trial, and the jury may find him not guilty for the simple fact that he's not in their, mind, he's not an influential part of the government. Now, he's got several. Remember, he's been charged with a lot, so that's the first degree and intent. The second count is murder in the second degree as a crime of terrorism. So he got first and second. The defendant in the county of New York on or about December 4, 2024, intent to intimidate or coerce a civilian population, influence the policy of a unit of government by intimidation or coercion, and affect the conduct of a unit of government by murder. So those are the elements that we just went over, and it's in his charges. So it kind of breaks it down, or kidnapping. Specified offense of murder in the second degree, in that offended with intent to the death of another person caused the death of Brian Thompson. So it has to fall under those categories, that reasoning behind the charges. So from my understanding, they are charging him with that because the prominent individual, they put Brian Thompson under that category because he's a CEO of United Healthcare. Now, the third count of murder in the second degree, with intent to cause the death of another person. Fourth, and that was the third degree, murder in the second degree, so don't get that mixed up. It was his third count, but it was murder in the second degree. His fourth count is criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. This is because, if you remember, he had a handgun, of course. An armed felony committed as followed. The defendant of New York on or about December 4th possessed a loaded firearm with intent to use the same unlawfully against another individual. Then we have his fifth count, which they charged him with criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. So see how they're just basically stacking these charges on, just, randomly putting them together. Now, me and another individual on Twitter, one of the news journalists, were talking about how they, completely nailed him with anything they possibly could. Excessive with charges. So the fifth count, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, possessed a loaded firearm in the defendant's home or place of business. So that's the difference. Okay, so even though he got criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, and you would assume that that would be twice, but that's just where they can get you. That just goes to show you how they're utilizing every resource possible to try and make it more difficult for him, is because they're both criminal possession in the second degree, but one is possessed a loaded firearm with intent to use the same unlawfully against another person. Whereas the fifth count, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, was charged because he possessed a loaded firearm in possession not being in defendant's home or place of business. So because he wasn't in his home or, his place of business, they gave him the second charge of criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree. Okay, then the sixth count is criminal possession of a weapon on the third degree. So, they just continue to nitpick with his charges. And I know you guys have expressed that a lot on here about how the charges are excessive, and they've literally utilized every resource possible. So his sixth count, criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree, the defendant in the county of New York on or about December 4th possessed an assault weapon. So he got third degree possession of a weapon because he had an assault weapon. So his seventh count is criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree again. So he got third degree twice thus far because he possessed a firearm silencer. Sixth count, possession of a weapon in the third degree. So he got it 3 times. So this is 3 times. Possession of a large capacity ammunition feeding device, to wit a Glock magazine. His ninth count is the same, criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree, and he got that from a large capacity ammunition feeding device, to wit a Magnum magazine. So one is for a Glock magazine, one is for a Magnum magazine. And if you quite remember, they said he had a gun that was basically used from one of those jet ink things, like printers. So that's where all those come from. His 10th count, criminal possession of a weapon in the 4th degree. He received this charge because not being a licensed as a gunsmith or dealer in firearms pursuant to Penal Code 400, and knowing that it was a ghost gun, possessed a ghost gun. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but the ghost guns are new. Well, not new, but they are becoming more common that we see in the a lot of the murders that have been occurring. And these are guns that cannot be traced. That's the reason why. So that was the 10th count. So we have murder in the first degree, murder in the second degree as a crime of terrorism, murder in the second degree, criminal possession of a weapon in the second degree, times 2, criminal possession of a weapon in the third degree, times 3, and criminal possession of a weapon in the 4th degree, times 1 criminal possession of a forged instrument in the 2nd degree, times 1. And the reason for that is because he had a fake ID. That is the state charges. Federal charges are completely different, and we're going to break those down too because I know you guys were questioning about it. So we'll break down those charges in our next live stream, and we will go over what his upcoming trial is going to be like.
Hey there! Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update.